start just by apologizing for the delay in this webinar. I had laryngitis last week, and no one would have been able to hear me if I had done it last week, so I appreciate everyone for coming and tuning in tonight, and sorry again for the delay. I want to give just a brief explanation of my perspective. One of my favorite things about the GPLI webinars is they come from all different corners of the country and all different types of contact lens specialists. And they have all different types of perspectives. So they might be from an academic setting or a research setting, and mine is from private practice. And I'm especially excited about this topic because I sort of have been scratching specialty lens fits out of the general public for the last 10 years. And I sort of make it a personal challenge to myself to try to find something special or unique or difficult about every patient so that I can talk them into some sort of specialty contact lens of some kind. And sometimes the most I can do is maybe make their soft lenses a little more special. And I try to circle on these three big pillars of contact lenses. So if you can get something better with any one of these three categories for a patient, generally that brings you even closer to the sort of perfect contact lens fit. So I'm going to talk tonight about how we can improve these main three pillars of contact lenses, how we can improve upon the fit for a patient in a custom soft lens, how we can improve the vision for a patient in a custom soft lens, or how we can improve upon the comfort. We'll start with fit, and it's funny, I actually reached out to a few different labs, consultants, and owners of labs, and I asked them what they want the listeners tonight to know about custom soft lenses. Is there anything special or new that I should be talking about? And every one of them said they would like you all to know how incredibly customizable these lenses are. It's probably the greatest feature of custom soft lenses in that we can get pretty much any parameter we want at any time for any patient in a relatively short amount of time. We can order these on a Monday and often have them by Friday or even before that. And we can have virtually any power we would desire. And not just power, but plenty of other parameters. So when you're talking about making the fit special for a patient, you can do this in many different ways. So starting with base curve to power to diameter, both the overall diameter and the optic zone diameter, to the thickness, to the material, to the replacement schedule, to adding prism. Those are all sorts of things we can do to make the fit customized to each patient. I'll go over each one of those things that we can customize individually. We'll start with base curve. And the range, it's funny, I was looking at different labs and different ranges, and I was going to make it per lab or per lens, but then I realized that the range really was almost anything you could ever want, or at least anything imaginably useful. So in other words, you can get something that's incredibly steep, but at some point you may not want to just order a lens that's extra steep. If you have a cone or something that you want something steep for, you're probably going to want a specialty design with other special fitting characteristics. But generally, for any patient with relatively normal cornea, or cornea that has a smaller diameter or something that you might want something a little steeper or a little flatter for, you get pretty much any base curve that you can imagine would be useful for that patient. Only limited, again, by the corneal condition and other factors that might make you want to choose more of a specialty design. I will point out that when you're ordering custom base curves, you might want to keep in mind diameter and how those two things go together rather closely. This is a chart off one of the custom labs you can order from, Alden Optical, and it sort of shows how they think about the relationship. They have this little chart, and you can go put in your average K reading from the patient and the lens diameter that you would like to use and how that changes the base curve that you would order for the patient. And every lab that you might order a custom soft lens for has their own sort of calculator or set of rules that they apply to this sort of thing. But in general, I think it's important to remember that diameter and base curve kind of go hand in hand, and one affects the other, much like they would in GP fitting, but even just as much so in a custom soft lens. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute when I get to diameter, but I'll briefly touch on power. Again, you can get virtually any power that you would find useful. The most that I found was plus 30 to minus 30, cylinder up to 15 diopters, axis, and every 1 degree step you can imagine. Ads, you can go plus 4 or higher. You can go bananas with the ad, although that's not all that useful in most cases. If you're having trouble getting a multifocal to work, you need to do more than just put the ad at plus 8. A standard 250 ad or a 275 ad, you can go higher. You can go up to, in many cases, a plus 4 or more if you had to. Thinking about customizing diameter, again, we can reach just about any diameter that we might want to reach for. Again, you wouldn't want to go maybe order like a 60 millimeter lens, but basically anything that could be imagined as far as useful, even if you're talking about macrocornea, microcornea, something unusual, or just something above the average. If the average corneal diameter is somewhere between 11.5 to 11.8, you could get anything that's outside those normal ranges pretty easily with a custom soft lens. A couple ways you can measure corneal diameter. You can measure the horizontal visible iris diameter, which for most fitting purposes is close enough. You can do this using just a PD stick. You can grab your slit lamp and put up the little reticule like up in the upper right-hand corner there picture. I do it via topographer because generally I don't know when I might want to get this ahead of time, so I actually have most new patients, if possible, get a topography, and then I can always go back and measure it if I feel like I need to know that parameter later on, even if I don't know it ahead of time. And there's a few other ways you can do it, but those are probably the most easier, the most common. As I was mentioning before with diameter and base curve and how they relate, it's good to know that those two can affect each other in some ways. There are some calculators on different custom lab websites or known out there in the contact lens world where you can sort of calculate an effective keratometry reading based on the average K and then taking the diameter and sort of calculating for every 0.2 millimeters that it's off or it's outside the average in the diameter. You can then calculate the average K to derive a base curve from. But to me, that's just a little bit more complicated than I need to have during my busy daily schedule. So I'm just sort of aware that diameter may vary the base curve and vice versa. And I also like to think about sagittal depth in general. Now this is not as important in a soft lens as it is, of course, in like a scleral or a hybrid, but it's still helpful to know that sometimes if you have different diameters, you might want to change base curves to maintain sag and vice versa. And I think it's just helpful to think of sagittal depth in general as opposed to each individual parameter, sort of the don't lose the forest because you're looking at the trees sort of premise. So again, just being mindful of diameter and base curve and how they relate, I think, is useful when you're ordering custom soft lens. And you don't have to use the fancy calculators, but they are available on a lot of the labs websites. If you want to go check out your custom labs websites, a lot of times you can find how they derive those relationships if you're not interested in calculating them for yourself. Just a quick case study in how you might use a larger diameter for a patient to make their custom lens fit a little bit more special. So I had this patient this summer. He was a 17-year-old male, and his girlfriend came with him to his eye exam and wanted him to get contacts. And he wasn't real excited about the idea, but he seemed to want to go ahead with it. So we got his refraction. He's been coming here for many years, happily wearing glasses. We took his Ks. Those are from my topography. And everything matches pretty well. He doesn't seem to have a lot of residual or lenticular cylinder. Things seem to line up pretty well for any type of contact lens. And we tried a few soft torics, but none of them seemed to be quite right. He complained about vision, or he complained about comfort or fit. I threw on a hybrid, and he was not having that at all, so I didn't think a GP would be all that effective. And so I started to think maybe he was just being whiny, or he didn't really want the contacts. His girlfriend just wanted them, but he was trying to find fault in everything we were trying. So I went to his topographies just to make sure I wasn't missing anything, and sure enough, his corneal diameter was a little bit larger than average. So I just sent that over to the lab that I was using to order some custom soft lenses. There's the topography view of his cornea, and there's where I measured his overall diameter. There's 12.2. So about 0.4 to 0.5 larger than average. And we ordered some IntelliWave torics. We've got pretty standard diameter actually for those types of lenses, but then the base curves were altered to be a little bit flatter to match the fact that we had a slightly larger cornea. So instead of just going larger in diameter to match the larger cornea, we went a little bit flatter in the base curve, again utilizing that base curve diameter relationship. So I'm going to move on to customizing the thickness of the lens, which can be really useful when you're trying to get a lens to center better or to improve rotation. Can be helpful in really high prescriptions. For example, if you had a really high minus lens and the upper lid was picking up the lens too high or moving it off temporally or something like that, you can increase center thickness much like you would in a GP lens to get it to center a little bit better. Or in a toric lens, if you want to reduce some rotation or improve the direction of rotation, sometimes increasing center thickness is a useful tool to have. Just being mindful of how when you increase thickness you may change oxygen through the lens. So be mindful of that. You can also customize material with a lot of these custom lenses. You have the choice in many cases of silicone hydrogel or hydrogel. In a lot of the hydrogels, you have some choice based on water content, what % water you would like to have your lens to be. A lot of the silicone hydrogels now available for customization are made out of the same definitive material from Conomac, but there's a few options, especially in hydrogel, that you could choose from if you wanted to try different material for patients who might have depositing issues or dryness. You can also vary material based on how often you'd like the lens to be replaced. If you don't want a lens that's an annual replacement, if you want something that's quarterly or monthly, a lot of times that's something that you can change material to achieve. It's helpful to be mindful of how much the oxygen will affect the patient and how much oxygen need you have. And I know we talk a lot about DK and lenses, but in custom lenses, it's helpful to remember DK over T, so our DK over thickness, and keeping in mind lens thickness and how that affects the oxygen transmission. For example, if a lens is really high plus for a patient who's an aphakic, you want to make sure that if you can be in a silicone hydrogel to improve oxygen, but even then in a really thick lens you can decrease the DK just based on thickness. So it's helpful to be mindful that a lot of times these lenses are quite thick, and you can choose your material based on how much oxygen need you think you might have, or how much oxygen need you find you have over time. Another sort of neat parameter you can customize in a custom soft lens is prism. It can go up to 4 prism diopters on most of the lab websites. They specify that's about the maximum you can do, and you are limited to base up or base down. But still, a lot of my most loyal patients are ones that I just gave a diopter of vertical prism to. So it's helpful to be able to tell them that they're not maybe limited to glasses. They can actually wear contact lenses and they won't lose their fusion or get headaches because they don't have their old standby prism. So it's a useful parameter to know that you can add to the lens. So those, hopefully, we covered most of that without too much of the interruptions, and how we can improve the fit for patients using a custom soft lens. I'm going to talk briefly about how we can improve the vision for a patient in a custom soft lens. Compared to some of the other custom modalities, in a custom soft lens, there's no problems generally with corneal molding, unless they're doing something like extended wear, which generally I don't talk about much in a custom soft lens, but in some of the silicone hydrogels you may be able to authorize that or talk about that. But in general, no corneal molding issues tend to arise. You can adjust the optic zone diameter, which is a useful parameter to control. I don't know of any off-the-shelf soft lenses that give me that sort of option, but in a custom soft lens, you do have that option. It's helpful if you think you might need to do that to measure pupil size, to talk to consultation about how you might go about this. You could start with normal room illumination, whatever that may be for the patient. Or task specific if they work in a dark environment or a really bright environment and they want to change the optic zone based on where they're normally working. I think it's useful to know where they're using the lenses so that you can measure pupil size and an appropriate type of illumination for that. Also, some of the lenses allow for asphericity customization. IntelliWave, for example, brags about how it can enhance low light acuity and improve contrast sensitivity with aspheric front surface aberration control. It's a pretty nifty thing to offer that you may not be able to offer in some of the more standard soft lenses. And probably the biggest way to improve vision in a custom soft lens is to help patients who are in torics. You can all the aforementioned fit specifics, like controlling prism or thickness or diameter to control rotation, or to get rotation to sit more steady through the day. You can alter overall diameter, base curve, sagittal depth. You can control all these properties to make a toric just fit better. Prism in particular, I think it's forgotten a lot as far as torics, but a standard parameter to increase if you're having trouble with soft lens toric rotation. And not only controlling rotation, but you can be really specific with torics when they're custom. You can order the exact axis that a patient may need. And instead of 10-degree steps, you can order 1-degree steps or 2-degree steps or whatever you might need. You can order really high cylinder powers. And they're ideal for residual or lenticular cylinder patients, those whose keratometry readings may not match their topographies all that, or their refraction all that well. Here's another just quick case example. I had a 26-year-old white male, had amblyopia in his left eye. And I have a number of these patients who are relatively plano in one eye and see really well out of that eye and had glasses or patching history, but at some point sort of lost track of whatever they were doing to correct the worst of the two eyes, and are just sort of floating along one-eyed, even though there's potential. And this fellow had a lot of potential. He had done patching as a kid. Just with the first refraction in his left eye he's had in 10 years, I got him to a little better than 20/40. So I knew that there was a lot of potential there, and ordering him a custom lens just made perfect sense. I could get high plus, I could get cylinder, I could be really exact about it, because if it wasn't going to be good, he wasn't going to adapt to wearing it, being that his other eye was so good. And sure enough, after about a week, he came back and he was noting better depth perception. He had a little bit of weirdness to start, but he was getting, only a week later, he was getting almost 20/30 with the custom lens, and I'm sure with some time that would improve even further. So he was pretty happy wearing a contact lens in one eye. Again, custom, because it was a difficult prescription, but when we got it right, he noted improvement for sure. Another way to improve vision with custom soft lenses is certainly in multifocals, and it's just because of all the control that you have. If things are going wrong and you're not sure why things aren't working, recheck pupil size, recheck centration. You can change center distance or center near in the multifocals in many designs, and that could be useful not just in multifocals for presbyopes, but also for myopia control. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the large amount of control you have over the multifocal lenses in custom soft is what makes them so beneficial to have in your armament when you're fitting a presbyope. You can do any prescription that you would like. You can add the torics in, which is really nice. They're not just limited to monovision at this point. If monovision's not working, or even if you just don't like to fit monovision, which I prefer not to fit monovision if I don't have to, I can order a custom multifocal with any prescription that I might want. I can increase the ad if I need to, although again, like I said before, or hopefully it was heard before, that may not be the most useful parameter to adjust, but if needed, you can go higher than standard multifocals. And this may not just be for presbyopes, this could also be for young patients with a little bit of computer vision syndrome or accommodative insufficiency. Briefly, here's another case that I used a multifocal toric in. She tried a few regular soft multifocals, had a little bit of success, but just was held back in a few areas. Just vision wasn't just as clear as she wanted. She did not like monovision. She'd already tried that. Here's her refraction and her Ks, which don't actually match all that well. There's likely some lenticular sill here that's just not matching. So I don't think she was a good candidate for GPs. So we went custom soft. She had a little bit of over refraction on the left eye, but once we've got lenses on her and lenses ordered, she ended up with pretty great vision. She was really pleased. And she ordered the very next day after we dispensed her custom lenses, which was a lot of fun to see after she had failed so many times and just sort of standard off-the-shelf lenses. Other things you can control in multifocals to help with vision. You can control the material. Depending on the patient's age, you can choose silicone for better oxygen, or you can choose maybe a hydrogel for less depositing, for better wettability. You can vary the replacement schedule based on how often you think they might need to replace the lenses. Might be able to better control handling of the lenses. Sometimes silicone hydrogels have a little more sturdiness because of their increased module. Might give a presbyope who has a difficult time seeing other lenses a little easier time handling the lens. And then for younger patients, it's kind of a nice option if they have any sort of accommodative issue. You can throw in the multifocal. This young kid I've been seeing for many years, he had accommodative esotropia. He did really well in his glasses, but wanted contacts for sports, but didn't want to have to switch back and forth at school. He's been wearing an ad in his spectacles for a long time. I ordered his multifocal center distance, wanted to give him the most advantage in distance that I could, and he wasn't an absolute presbyope, so he still had some accommodative skills. We just wanted to enhance that. And he was wearing his lenses 4 years later quite happily, and that was just recently. That was just this past month. So it was a nice move for him, and he's been ordering custom lenses every year ever since. So we talked about improving the fit for patients, improving the vision for patients, and now how can we improve comfort for patients in custom soft lenses? Well, I usually think of irregular cornea patients when I think of improving comfort with a custom soft lens, although really by improving the fit and the vision, it makes the lens more comfortable for a patient in general. But for patients that might have irregular corneas, prolate corneas, oblate corneas, who have had corneal trauma or congenital abnormalities, aphakics, our alternatives are soft lenses, standard soft lenses, which probably won't provide them the best vision. GP lenses, which I am a big fan of. I fit a lot of GPs, but some patients can't handle the comfort or the initial adaptation of a GP lens. Sclerals, hybrids, piggyback systems might be too complicated. I know sclerals right now are sort of being talked about as being the bee's knees for all irregular corneas, but they are still formidable lenses, and there are still plenty of patients who can't tolerate them or aren't able to insert and remove them or are just plain scared of them. I've had plenty of patients that I've tried to fit in sclerals just admit, through even just the initial fitting process that it wasn't for them and that we needed to find an alternative modality for them, and that's where custom soft lenses really can shine. They can provide better initial comfort. So if you have a patient who's unable to put in the couple weeks of adaptation that it might take to get used to a GP lens or similar, those that have lifestyle concerns who don't want full-time wear, maybe they want something part-time, they have an environment that isn't conducive to a GP lens or hard lens, or just have handling issues, like I said, might just be a little too can't handle the tolerance or the adaptation to a harder lens. I really like them for part-time wearers, and I have an example in a few minutes of a pellucid patient that is an irregular corneal patient who does pretty well with spectacles, as a lot of pellucid patients actually do, with a little against the rule still, but she wanted the part-time option of contact lenses, and so in a minute I'll show you, but we fit her into a custom soft, and she did surprisingly well. Patients who have grown intolerant of GPs, patients with VLK or scleral lens fogging or just difficulty with handling. All of these patients don't have to be told that they just need to deal with it. We could try a custom soft, and there are really good custom soft lens options now for irregular corneal patients. Here's just a few of the prolate cornea examples that you can order. I mean, this is maybe not even a comprehensive list, but there are plenty of brands that are provided by plenty of different labs that we can try these. There's no reason to say that these lenses don't exist or these options don't exist, because there are a lot of them. Some of them are hydrogel, some of them are silicone hydrogel, some of them offer both. One of my favorites for irregular corneas in general is the Kerasoft IC. This is a fairly new lens. It's the definitive material. Silicone hydrogel. You can fit all types of irregular corneas in this lens. They have many different options for fit for different corneal shapes and sizes. I think taking the training for this lens is a real hoot. It's fun to watch. There's a nice British woman with a great accent that is really soothing, and it's really easy to pay attention to and to follow through. They make it really simple fitting. Although there are some complicated details to fitting, they make it in a way that it's really easy to learn how to do. You do have to complete the training before you can get the fitting set. And once you have the fitting set, you can also access the fitting app, which is pretty useful. They have a little fitting saying Morocco, which stands for movement, rotation, centration, and comfort, to achieve the best visual acuity. And you can apply the rules as they sort of describe them here in this little fit chart, but it's more important to watch their little training webinar, because it really does a great job of leading you into how to fit this lens. And I find this lens really useful. In fact, this is the lens that I used on that pellucid patient. Again, I've tried just about everything on her. Whenever I have a fitting workshop or introducing a new lens or a new lens modality, she comes and she tries it. She's game for anything, but nothing ever sticks because she only wants part-time wear. She doesn't want to have to go through a long adaptation process, and she sees really well in her spectacles. I mean, there's her vision in spectacles, which is quite good. So there's her cornea. It's pretty classic pellucid, both sides, a little worse in the right. And we put her in the Kerasoft. It was actually a little bit challenging to get it fit. The right eye had pretty severe pellucid, so we had inferior edge fluting, but luckily they have a little inferior sector steepening option that I added at the end of the fit, and that seemed to take care of that pretty easily. So those were the parameters ordered. Most Kerasoft ICs are actually ordered toric, and initially I didn't realize that. I was trying to do best sphere over refractions, but there's no need. You can be quite exact. And there was her final acuity. The right eye maybe not even as good as in spectacles on the chart, but she noted better outdoor vision, overall vision, and driving vision, better peripheral vision. In fact, she liked them so much she's considering a monovision option down the road if she decides to wear them full time. Plenty of options in custom soft lenses for oblate corneas. There's plenty of reasons one might have an oblate cornea, refractive surgery, PKP, Intacs, things like that. And a lot of the brands are the same as they were for prolate corneas. And then there's a few special ones like the Revitalize is generally just for oblate corneas. Kerasoft, again, covers a wide range of different corneal shapes. So there's plenty of options. There's no excuse not to try these on a patient who can't adapt to a different modality. I'll take a quick break for questions. I know I lost some time with connection issues, but we'll see if there's any questions before I move on.
Well, I can answer that. Roxana, you sound great. Hopefully it's just the go-to webinar software that we had a little bit of a problem, and I think everything sounds wonderful. While I wait to see if anybody does ask a question, a couple of comments. We're going to premiere, our plan is to premiere 2 new programs at the Global Specialty Lens Symposium in Las Vegas at the end of January. One of them is a scleral lens troubleshooting module, which is a combined effort between, it'll be online, combined effort between the GPLI and the Scleral Lens Education Society. And then our staff module, which actually Dr. Potter contributed several webinars as part of it, as part of the staff training component, education component. So I think you'll really like it. We just need to finish it up and launch it, and I think you'll like it. That said, I think you can finish up, Roxana.
Okay, we'll keep going. So I talked about how to improve fit for these patients, how to improve vision, how to improve comfort using this custom soft lens. I'll briefly touch on how you can improve your own profitability. Again, I have a private practice perspective, so that's always at the top of my mind. With a custom soft lens, you create a loyal patient. You've given them something they can't get anywhere else or many other places. You can control your desired profit. So if you're going to put more time into this patient, you can put a little bit more into the price of the lens that you're selling. Again, within reason, but if you're customizing a lens or making it special for a patient, not only will they see the value in that, but they'll be willing to pay for that. And they'll be willing to pay for it year after year as they come back to you. So I think it's definitely a lens option that builds trust and loyalty. It establishes you as the contact lens master. You're the one in town that fixed their tricky lens fit or gave them the special lens with the larger diameter. And again, you can get the lenses really quickly, so rather than waiting for a lens from a company that might take 2-3 weeks to send you an extended parameter, you can actually get these from your local friendly lab, and they come within just a few days. They can be quite affordable. Specialty doesn't have to mean expensive, and I like to tell patients that. Sometimes it's a little more than, a monthly lens they could get a cool rebate with, but generally, again, compared to other specialty lenses, sclerals, for example, they are quite affordable. I would encourage you to have policies or handouts, something that you give to the patient. There's a copy of mine, just sort of goes over the remake policy and what to do with trials. The patient needs to understand that these are not necessarily throwaway trials. These are things that are specialty made for them. They may have to be returned. This policy does not cover every lens. This is just our general lens. It's for any custom lens that we dispense, sclerals, GPs, soft, whatever. But you may have to write some specifics in there if you have a lens that has different policy than what this says. But generally, I give most patients 90 days. Even if it's longer than that, I generally keep it to 90 days just so that I don't have to remember anything else. But I like to talk about what happens if they lose a lens, what happens if they tear or break a lens, and what to do with shipping costs and things like that. So I want them to know ahead of time that I'm giving them something custom. It's not something I got for free from the company out of the drawer. It's something that if I pay for if it doesn't get returned. And a lot of the labs now have wonderful policies that you don't actually even have to return the lenses, but I still don't want the patient to think that I can just give them endless trials that they don't have to worry about if they lose. So depending on the rules, I might give them a little more leeway, but this is generally the policy that I insist on for pretty much any specialty lens I give, custom soft included. And I can email copies of this to anyone if you're interested. I'll have my email up at the end. So profitability is something you can improve for yourself. Custom soft lenses can also afford a little bit better for myopia control. It's fairly interesting, the things that you need for soft lens multifocal myopia control, which I've been doing a little bit more of lately. I used to do a lot of orthokeratology and I do low dose atropine, but as a nice third option, I like to offer this for certain patients. You do have to have a lens that's center distance. You want as high of an ad as you can possibly get that the patient can tolerate. And sometimes if you want to increase the ad, you need to control the optic zone to offset some of the aberrations or issues you might give to the patient with a higher ad. So it's nice to have control of these things. And in a beautiful way, you can provide these to patients that even have astigmatism that maybe you previously wouldn't have been able to offer orthokeratology to, or that maybe don't want to commit to atropine. And any level of myopia. I know there's been studies that show even high myopes benefit from myopia control just to lessen the amount that they get. It's interesting that we can offer this to just about any myope we want now with custom soft lenses. For cosmesis, custom soft lenses can be useful. His patient I had this summer, fishing injury many years ago. He's been walking around with basically no iris in the right eye. He's developed sort of a permanent squint on that side. He's been so photophobic for many years. He used to wear Durasoft colors. In fact, he still has one that he pulls out of the drawer every now and then, which I think is pretty gross, but it doesn't actually look that bad, surprisingly. He cleans it well. But regardless, he was looking for something new. And we went with a custom lens from Orion. They have a couple different ways you can go about this. You can get a loaner fitting set, or you can send digital photos and they'll match. I got the fitting set because I'm more of a hands-on type of person, and cost-wise it made more sense to me at the time. But went with an underprint, got him a lens, corrected some of his aphakia. He reported that he was much less photophobic. He loved how it looked. He actually got a surprising amount of vision that he reported, better than he's had in quite some time. That's how it ended up looking. I do wish I'd got a little bit more Arcus around the outside as opposed to the black and the limbal ring that was black. But generally, and this is pretty close up, but from a reasonable distance, it looked really good. And then in the future, looking towards newer things that might be offered in custom soft lenses, we have the potential for IOP measuring or drug eluting or drug dispensing. There's the triggerfish, which I know that is being used in many countries throughout the world. I think it was 33 countries last I looked have approval to use this lens. It was approved for marketing in the United States last spring, so I'm hopeful that that means we'll actually be using this lens in the very near future. As far as drug dispensing lenses, that's sort of like the urban myth of optometry. We've been hearing about it for a long time. No one really knows if it's true or if it's really going to happen, but there is quite a bit of research in that department, so I feel like that is something down the road that we'll have access to as well. A few issues with custom soft lenses. I want to touch on this because they're not without some faults or some issues. Many of them do have extended replacement schedules, meaning they are quarterly replacement or maybe 6 months or annually replacement lenses. They can have practice management challenges like I was mentioning before. Sometimes the patient might think that it's just throwaway trials or they don't realize how custom the lenses are, or maybe even the staff doesn't realize that and they're talking about the lenses as disposable trials. And also sometimes cost to patient can be more than maybe what they were expecting with just a soft lens fit. With longer replacement schedules, compliance can be an issue. Patients might forget quarterly type replacement. It's easier to remember once a month, for example, than it is maybe every quarter. But with cell phones nowadays, it's easy enough to put a reminder in the phone, and I like to tell patients before they leave for the last time with their custom soft lens that they need to do that immediately, or I even recommend they do it in the office while they're there, put in their quarterly phone reminder on their calendar. We need to be careful with depositing, particularly with the silicone hydrogel materials. The quarterly lens, the silicone hydrogel, can be a recipe for depositing, so it's helpful to be aware of that and depositing then leading to dry eye. We have had a few patients that we know are typically non-compliant with replacement, so we have a little reminders on our calendar, and one of my staff members has a calendar that she keeps track of when trials are ordered and when they need to be returned, and she also puts on the occasional patient reminder to send them an email or a text that it's time for them to replace their quarterly lens. We don't do a lot of that. That's a fairly patient-specific thing, but you could organize that sort of thing if you wanted to be really diligent about reminding patients about their compliance. Making sure they understand the risks of wear is always important with contact lens fit. And I always try to remind patients that the replacement schedule is a maximum recommendation. So if it's a quarterly lens, that doesn't mean they have to reach the full quarter. They can change it monthly. They can change it more often. They might have to pay a little more to do that, and I might have to give them special authorization to do that, but there's no reason a lens that's recommended to be quarterly can't be less than quarterly. It just depends on how much they can tolerate or how much depositing they get. In the case of depositing, I do have a few sort of go-to weapons. Generally, all of my custom lens patients are recommended to be in a peroxide-based cleaning solution. There's a few options. They have to replace their cases appropriately. We don't want to be growing biofilms in the bottom of their case. There are enzymes still available, and there's the rewetting with protein removal. I like to recommend that drop a lot. Enzymes are maybe not as available in stores as they used to, but if you go to Amazon and type in contact lens enzyme, you can pull up all kinds of these enzymes and still order quite a few of them. And they're not terribly expensive, so it's something that I think has gotten forgotten a lot over time with more and more frequent replaced lenses like dailies and things like that, but they're still out there, they're still available, and they still work. And as far as dry eye, everything we've talked about before, lots of research now being done in the Department of Dry Eye. I mean, I'm not going to go into a dry eye lecture, but a couple of the things that I tend to go to first, punctal plugs can still be quite useful. Treat their tear film, treat any marginal blepharitis that they might have. I'm trying BlephX currently, and I seem to be enjoying it. Lots of new ideas in dry eye and meibomian gland dysfunction that can be applied to contact lens dry eye. I think sometimes we forget that those two things are the same. If a patient has contact lens dryness, they also have regular dryness, and we need to treat it. So we talked about extended replacement schedules, challenges. Now a little bit on practice management challenges. Trial tracking, cost setting, staff training. So for trial tracking, it's important to know when you order the lenses and when your fitting needs to be over so that you don't run into having purchased lenses that aren't going to be used by the patient or eating the cost of the lenses. Make sure you have a solid remake policy. Remember, if you need to return or save the vials. I can't tell you the number of times when I first started fitting custom lenses that the lenses were put into a little contact lens case and the vials were moved or discarded, and then we went to return them and they weren't accepted because we didn't have them in the original vials. So you may not need the vials nowadays with some of the more free policies, but it's helpful to know if you do. When you're choosing the cost for some of these lenses, I think it's easier to be profitable by saving money and not losing money than it is to continually try to raise prices or get more money from the patient. So, I mean, it's important to set a price that you feel is valid, but it's also important to watch on the back end that you're not losing money by not returning trials or going past remake deadlines. So you have to think of these lenses as GPs or scleral lenses or any type of specialty lens where it's not just a disposable soft lens trial, and your staff needs to be aware of that as well. They need to realize that it'll cost you money if you don't return things that you're supposed to return or finalize fits within the time frame that you're supposed to finalize fits. Patients need to understand that as well. These lenses are specialty. And even with like verbiage that your staff uses when talking to patients, they need to realize that the trials are not disposable, so they can't just say, oh, just come up, pick up your trial on Friday and we'll talk to you Monday and see how you do. Now you might do that, but they have to realize that it's a custom lens. They may have to return it. They should know about fitting fees and cost of the lenses before they proceed with the fitting, if at all possible. You should be aware of what you're going to bill to the insurance and how they're supposed to clean and take care of the lenses. These are things that we normally do with any soft lens fit, but with the custom lenses, sometimes it's assumed that the rules are all the same when sometimes they're not. So that's a lot to remember, but generally when I'm approaching a patient, again, I sort of challenge myself to think of anything that I can come up with that's maybe special or more custom for that patient. I like to talk about their lifestyle or where they work or what they might need as far as oxygen requirements, how old they are. I like to make sure that I'm cognizant of any dry eye issues or tear film dysfunction. And then I gather all the data that I might need regardless of what I think I might end up doing in the lens. So I try to get a topography on any new patient at least, or any patient that's talking about a new contact lens fit. And then I automatically have the iris diameter or the corneal diameter if I need to go back and get it. And again, if I'm remembering that I might need pupil size for a multifocal fit or for a lifestyle specific or job specific task, it might be useful to control optic zone diameter. It's helpful to have a pupil size before you order. So if there's two things that you get before you embark on a custom soft lens mission, I would say it's corneal diameter and pupil size, because they'll come in handy down the road. And again, just being careful to make sure that you explain fees, policies, lens costs, and all that to the patient before you order the lenses and before they come back and before it's finalized. One of my very biggest pet peeves is when I do a perfect fit, patient's happy, they go up to the front desk, they go to order, and then there's an argument about cost or they're upset about unexpected costs or fees. I would recommend using consultation as much as possible when you're ordering custom soft lenses. They do this all the time. They're well used to providing assistance when ordering special parameters. They do have online calculators on a lot of the custom lab websites. But again, rather than me sitting and typing all that into the online calculator, I just call consultation and let them give me recommendations. Sometimes it's fun to do that, but it's not a useful use of my time. My time is better spent with the patient than it is doing all this little bitty math things that's specific per design. And online guidelines or fitting webinars that you can attend to watch each specific design is useful. They can be very different from each other, so it's helpful to to sort of learn about each specific lens and its little idiosyncrasies before you go ahead with the fit. But again, even if you didn't, you could lean on consultation, and then they would help you through the first few.
Thank you, Roxana. That was very. It certainly was a very contemporary overview. I think I love the cases. I think that really you bring in all the new technology and the new custom soft lenses and put them right into cases where everybody can apply them, and looking at how critical such factors are like pupil size and some of the anatomical measurements really become, and we have labs now that you have a material like definitive that you can lay cut and have any conceivable design parameter made, and companies that really will make about anything for us. It's remarkable the changes. We always think, well, soft lenses don't change that much, and you just showed that in fact they change dramatically, and they become a very useful tool in the practice, and we can fit a lot more people today than we could yesterday because of the parameters that we have available. So that was very, very useful. I know we had a comment from Tom Arnold, and he was right on and commenting that a 90 days follow-up for everyone is a good move, and it's exactly what he does, and I agree. Lauren Nicholas commented about the multifocal lenses. How do they work to control myopia?
Well, that might be better served by watching like a Jeff Walleen lecture, but in general, it's all about peripheral defocus. And I'm sort of a fan of the any plus, any place theory, where if you can add plus to these patients, especially if they have any sort of esotropic positioning, binocularity issues, if we can get some plus in their vision, whether it's a soft lens bifocal or it's just moving peripheral defocus using orthokeratology, or maybe even a spectacle bifocal in certain cases. I know that's been proven to not be helpful in all cases, but if you can push some plus to these patients in any way, even the ones that have toric requirements or higher myopia, it generally can be helpful in myopia control. I mean, there's a whole lot of research backing up all of these things, and again, that's maybe not the point of this webinar, but my three main myopia control methods are low-dose atropine, orthokeratology, and soft lens multifocals that are center distance and as high of edge as I can provide. And with the custom soft lenses, now I can provide this to a lot more patients than I was before, which is really useful.
It's going to be fascinating to see what happens in the years ahead. If we had a crystal ball, and I'm certainly not futuristic, but it would appear that if we're looking 2, 3, 4 years down the road, that we might have an avalanche of parents coming into our practices to inquire about myopia control. I think the potential with some of the soft lens designs out there that are being looked at seriously, in addition to the ones that we're using off-label right now, it would become apparent there's a lot of potential. They do appear to work by peripheral retinal defocus, but it's also a situation where the impact may not be as much as overnight orthokeratology. There's still a lot we don't know. At Global last year, Helen Swarbrick made a lot of good points talking about where we are not at yet with peripheral plus soft lenses. But the fact remains that there's been some very good short-term data to show that it does slow down axial growth. It's a method that seems to complement orthokeratology very well. And again, once we have these lenses on the market and FDA approved, and for example, if you have a big company behind it and the money for marketing it, it could absolutely explode. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens 2, 3, 4 years down the road.
Well, and I feel there's no reason now to hold back if you're fitting someone in context anyway. And you know, if they're open to having a little bit of a multifocal or as much as you can give them, why not slow things down? I mean, like you said, the research is promising. They might want a custom lens with a nice toric anyway, and if I can throw some plus in there and maybe give them a little bit of a benefit, you know, again, talking to the parents and the patient and letting them know it's not FDA approved at this point, but I can't think of a downside to doing that.
No, I think it's true, and it's interesting because I'm a big fan of orthokeratology, and of course it has the benefit of the fact that you can take current myopia, reduce it, and they can not wear a correction during the day, which is a huge benefit, and as well as the astigmatic benefits. But But what's interesting is in our GP update article in the October issue of Contact Lens Spectrum, when we polled the readership this year, when it talked about your myopia control program includes soft multifocals or peripheral plus soft lenses, actually scored a little bit higher usage than orthokeratology for the first time. So it is, you are correct. People are utilizing these lenses in office. I know one of the questions we had, Charles Lay wanted to know, and I guess it'd be okay. I don't think there's a reason why, but we just want to know which center distant multifocals do you prefer to use for myopia control?
I use IntelliWave from Art. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I'm sure there's more options than that. That's just the one that I used. But
yeah, very good.
I mean, I also use Biofinity D lenses. Those are the two that I use primarily, but IntelliWave if I need a toric.
Okay. One final question, and this pertains to your keratoconic patients.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, I think Francisco wants to know where, what patients would you specifically be looking at for using, and you did address this to a certain degree, but what patients would you be specifically looking at to put into a especially soft lens in keratoconus?
That's a great question, which I probably should have talked about a little bit, but I generally will still go with a GP type material for most keratoconics, especially if they're inexperienced, and well, either if they're experienced or they're inexperienced. I usually try to get a GP lens on because I think you'll still get the very best optics with a GP lens, but there are so many cases where that's simply not possible. They can't tolerate the adaptation, or they've grown intolerant over the years, or they can't handle scleral lens fogging. They can't remove the lenses midway through the day, or they want part-time wear. They want something that they don't have to readapt to every couple months when they decide to pull out their contacts. So I think pellucid is a great reason to try custom soft lens. But it's generally not my first choice. But if there's any pushback as far as to the GP or the hybrid, it's definitely a good alternative.
All right, very good. Well, we'll bring tonight's program to an end. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend, particularly this week. I want to especially thank Dr. Roxana Potter for really a very contemporary clinical lecture on custom soft lenses, and thank her especially for all the time she put in developing this presentation. Please come back and join us Tuesday night, December 20th, when the topic will be scleral lenses, update on research fitting designs by one of the foremost experts in the country, Dr. Greg Denayer. On behalf of the Contact Lens Manufacturers Association, we want to wish you a very relaxing and family-filled Thanksgiving. We'll see you next month. Good night, everybody.